Alright, how's the sound here? Okay. Alright, I'm getting all these videos out because there are a ton of different topics that I feel are really important for me to share, just because there's just a lot of information that I really want to share about my experiences that I feel like people would be interested in learning about. So this topic that I have for my blog videos is really about what is it like to be Asian and grow up Catholic. Okay. Alright, so as some of you might recognize or see, maybe from my last name or from the way that, I look, I am Filipino-American. I do hold dual citizenship. I actually only got dual citizenship when I went to Washington, D.C. earlier this year to get, dual citizenship to the Philippines, because I've been only, solely a United States citizen since I was born up until then, for 25 years at least. But yeah, but aside from that being Filipino and being ethnically Asian, what is it like to grow up Catholic when most other Asian people, and I'm not talking about just East Asians, talking about all other Asians, including South Asians and Central Asians and West Asians and Russians. Well, yeah, Russians, because not everyone in Russia is Catholic, are not Catholic. Okay. Does it really make me feel like a minority? No, not at all. I want to explain a few things, okay? I kind of grew up with it like it was normal. I went to a Catholic school since kindergarten. Only when I went to two international schools overseas for military purposes, because I was in a military family, did I go to a non-private school that was Catholic for middle school, high school, or elementary school. So throughout all of my years of education until high school, I was in a Catholic, institution. I had religion classes, faith classes. I had a faith book that I used for learning faith as one of the core classes. So instead of it just being four, like social studies, language arts, science, and math, there was an additional one for faith. And it was part of the curriculum ever since, and it was just the way I remember things. Because it was, it was a religious school. Did I feel like I didn't fit in? Okay, no, not really. Because when I first went to school, in kindergarten, there were a lot of other people, in my class who also had, Hispanic last names. And if any of you are wondering why a lot of people in the Philippines have Hispanic last names, I do want to point out that according to Wikipedia, there was a Governor General by the name of General Narciso Claveria y Saldua who made a decree in the 1800s that asked for people in the Philippines to get Filipino surnames that had Spanish sounds to it in order to get the census complete. But the people who already had surnames, some of them were Spanish families, and some of them were Chinese families who came from China with names like Lim Siako, for example, of whom I do claim descendancy from according to my maternal grandmother. So I am a Lim. I'm not sure how far that goes, if it's the same as other characters like Lin or Im or Hayashi. I'm not sure, but I do claim ancestry there. They had to get surnames so that they could, have last names for their families, and it was assigned, and these names, had Spanish sounds to them. So everybody in the Philippines, at that time, got the names, and on top of that, as long as they were Filipino, as long as they were in the Philippines, and people who lived there, whether they were Indios or mestizos, or mestizas, or blancos or blancas, or what have you, chinos, chinas, they had this citizenship that belonged to Spain, because the Philippines was, in fact, Spain before. I think a lot of people forget that. It was, if it's an empire and another country is part of it, it's part of that country. So the Philippines was Spain for a very long time. So if anybody's saying to you, like as a Filipino, that you don't have Spanish ancestry, you can't say that ethnically. Well, you can say that ethnically you might not have any, but historically you do, because your ancestors were Spanish, because at some point in history they were Spanish citizens. So anyway, and on top of that, I also know that my mother says that I have ancestry from the Garcia bloodline and also from the Montesino bloodline. So, but the Spanish families got to keep their last names because they already had the names. So the names. When I was in school, I felt like I wasn't that weird because like I kind of felt like I fit in, especially with other Hispanic classmates. And then, you know, as time went on, there wasn't really that much trouble. And when I went to Spanish class, because I studied here in Florida, I learned Spanish in elementary school from kindergarten up. I didn't have a hard time because like I could learn the Spanish words, because a lot of the words that I grew up with at home had Spanish origin, because there's a whole lexicon. Like there can literally be like a whole sector of Filipino, the Filipino language, that can just be like derived from Spanish. And people like might not notice that these days. There is a trend, however, now where the Tagalog language is starting to get rid of a lot of the Spanish words so that formal Tagalog doesn't have a lot of it. I'm not exactly sure why, but you know, I can't question it. That's just the Philippines. But you know, when it comes to the language, there were at least a lot of Spanish loanwords that I recognized. And then you know, I think it was only when I started going to like a public institution that I started to sense that there was something different. When I went to Japan and I met some people who were like Japanese, who, you know, weren't maybe accustomed to like Catholicism, and then they met like Filipinos and everything, they would like, that was like when I realized that there are other people who are of Asian descent who aren't Catholic. And then it only got like even more apparent to me when I moved later to Gainesville. So Gainesville is a city in central Florida that doesn't have as much, I don't know, it doesn't have as much exposure to the Hispanic population as cities like Jacksonville or especially Miami, because there's just not as many Hispanic people. And that was one of the things I think that like kind of shocked me, like when I came back from Japan and then came to Florida and then started living in Gainesville, is that there isn't as much of like a Spanish influence in this area. So like I felt a little bit like more of a minority then, and I started to feel that. And people would like differentiate me from you know, being part of other groups because I'm Asian. And that's when, you know, I started feeling different and everything. I had to like, you know, try to explain to people that like, okay, I might be Asian and everything, and I might have come back here from Japan because I, you know, was there for military purposes as a military child. But, you know, I went to a Catholic school and like I followed the faith, and I have, you know, faith in God. Like I believe, that's what I believe in. I think there's a lot of like confusion sometimes, like when people ask about like the Philippines, about like how much Spanish influence is there really in the Philippines, you know, and DNA testing and whatnot. A lot of DNA testing, you know, shows that some Filipinos do have Spanish ancestry, but some Filipinos don't. There was a time that I was able to see Spanish ancestry and Chinese ancestry on my test for 23andMe, but then it disappeared later on. So I don't know. As the reports, you know, started to evolve and, you know, get affected by like other reports that like would get compared. So I don't know how the whole process works, but I know what my parents have told me. I know, you know, what my grandparents have told me about ancestry, so I like to believe them. I think that the influence in the Philippines from Spain primarily comes from our religion, our food, and I think, just our family customs. And of course the names. But I would say that the culture of the Philippines actually has a lot of impact from Spain. And I think people often underestimate that. If you really go to the Philippines, as an American citizen, if you travel to the Philippines these days, sure, you might think that it's a third world country, and you might think that it's it might look like it's similar to Malaysia or to Indonesia or to Thailand. But the more that you stay there and the more that you really study the culture of that part of the world, you will see that the Philippines does indeed have a Hispanic influence to it. It's quite obvious once you stay there for a while, trust me. I recommend to anybody, if you don't want to believe me, go to the Philippines and stay there for a week, and you will start to see how the culture there has a Hispanic influence. The people there are, I think it's really because of the way that people grow up in their families there. And I also want to point out that the Americans, Filipino-Americans, also have a completely different culture from Filipino-Filipinos. And also, another trend that I'm seeing is that I predict, that I predict might happen is that Filipino Tagalog might start to diverge from American Tagalog, because American Tagalog incorporates a lot of English words, and sometimes some words are used more than others for this Tagalog versus Filipino Tagalog. We'll see how that works out, but yeah. So that's just what I wanted to share about what it's like to be Catholic and be Asian. I regularly go to church and everything, and I feel like my faith is really solid because of all the years of education I've had in Catholic education. Aside from 5th grade and 6th grade, I feel like it's just really strong, and it's really well grounded in me, especially since in high school I had a lot of faith formation there. In high school, the place where I went for high school, which was at that time St. Francis Catholic High School, now St. Francis Catholic Academy, had a lot of faith classes as well, starting from learning the sacraments, and then learning basic faith foundations, to learning Old Testament and New Testament, and learning morality and ethics, and all of these things help to build a solid, grounded you in your faith. That when I went to university, it was still with me. Even if I was at the University of Florida, I would go to St. Augustine Catholic Student Center sometimes, for confession, or to go there for mass if I had free time. And because there's a Catholic church near the campus, so I don't think that my faith was taken away. There are a lot of other things that have happened after the Spanish time in the Philippines, such as American colonization and the Japanese invasion and Philippine independence and the Marcos era and whatnot. But the Catholic faith has stayed. There are a lot of other things there that have been, that have come up, for example, Iglesia Ni Cristo, and also some Protestant churches have grown, and also, of course, the Muslim population in the south in Mindanao, and the Buddhist population in certain parts. But the faith, the Catholic faith, it's really well instilled. I really do believe that the Spanish did a really a lot to like make sure that everybody became Catholic, because like until now almost everybody in the Philippines is Catholic. So that's just, that's just my comment about it. I'm proud to be Filipino. I'm proud to be Filipino-American. I'm proud to have a Catholic faith, and I'm proud to be Asian. So I don't know. If anybody has any comments about that, please let me know. There are a lot of things going on these days in America, like regarding racial discrimination and things of that nature. But I feel like one of the healthiest ways to talk about it is to just be communicative and have a good understanding of how of history and what we can share about in our experiences. So these are just the things that I'm sharing based on what my family knows from Philippine culture. So yeah. If you have any other questions about Philippine culture, please go ahead and look up some other videos on YouTube. I recommend, I actually recommend just generally looking up other YouTube videos on YouTube for Philippine culture and maybe learning a little bit of Tagalog. And maybe perhaps I can, in other videos I can share about what I think about the Philippines, what I think about Filipino culture. And thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope that you all have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye!